Welcome to today's episode. I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Esther Gokhale, a pioneering expert in the field of posture and wellness. Esther is the creator of the Gokhale Method, a groundbreaking approach to understanding and restoring primal posture. With a background in biochemistry from Harvard and acupuncture, Esther has spent decades researching and teaching how our bodies are designed to move and function optimally. Esther completely disagrees with the conventional ideas of what good posture should look like, believing that we've almost lost that ancient wisdom. In our conversation, we explore why everything from car seats to furniture is being mistakenly designed to fit the wrong spinal configuration. We also discuss the benefits and limitations of barefoot shoes, what to look for when choosing them, and why they may not be a cure-all. Additionally, Esther shares her insights on why belly breathing might not be as beneficial as commonly believed. Get ready for an eye-opening discussion that challenges conventional wisdom and offers practical tips to help you rediscover and maintain your natural primal posture. Welcome, Esther. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm excited to have a great conversation with you today.
I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So I want to start with something that maybe is a little bit different than you've done before and sort of ask you how you got started in all of this, right? Because this is not like, it sounds like it was a bit of an adventure and you did some traveling and went around, and it's sort of similar to my story. So I'm curious how that all got started.
Well, it started the hard way, like many of us start our journeys. I had a very, very badly herniated L5-S1 disc. Started in the 9th month of my first pregnancy. And at first, I was suggested that maybe it would go away after the baby was born. It didn't. It got worse and worse and worse, and so I had a horrible experience, not being able to carry my baby, not being able to even carry a cooking pot without feeling twinges. It was my L5-S1 disc, so all the way down to my toe, big toe. And I was trying all sorts of things, conventional, alternative, casting a wider and wider net, and not getting anywhere. And so then I finally had surgery. And after a year after the laminectomy, discectomy, I had the same disc reherniate, and they were offering me another surgery. And this is not looking good. Multiple back surgeries in your mid-20s doesn't bode well for your future, and I'd already been told no more kids, you have a weak back, etc. So it was looking very grim, and I just kept looking. And the things that made sense to me, the things that resonated most with me, were things about fixing your own body rather than looking for yet another intervention. I grew up in India. My mother's Dutch, my father's Indian, and she was very admiring of the local people's physicality. The sweeper who could sweep our home without any challenge, the fruit vendors who would carry these enormous loads on their head, and these are not people with Popeye kind of muscles. They're pretty lean, and they would do these impressive feats all day, every day. And so that stayed in my memory. And when I ran into trouble, these are the kinds of interventions that resonated for me. And I studied a number of methods on how you conduct your body, a little bit of Alexander technique, Feldenkrais. I found a lot in Aplomb. And that's a French yoga teacher who had done work with Iyengar. And so a lot of, because Iyengar's wisdom kind of came through, and Iyengar had told her, go walk behind the women in the Indian marketplace, and when your shadow looks like theirs, you will have learned something. And Iyengar is a family friend, a good friend of my mom's. when they were both alive. And so there were multiple resonances for me, and techniques that steady people who function well make sense. And
Hmm.
so, long story short, by doing all the things I've written up in my book, Eight Steps to a Pain-Free Back, and that we teach in our courses, online, in person, all around the world, I was able to get out of the need for the second back surgery. I was able to get completely out of pain. It's been over 35 years. I haven't had a twinge. I haven't had an ache, certainly no pain. And I now get to share with others, and it's an enormous pleasure and a privilege. Because the things that I learned that worked on my body do generalize. They extrapolate to others. It's touching on basic truths of the human body. So so we teach people how to sit and stand and bend and walk and lift and lie down, and it does amazing things. Little tweaks, big results.
And correct me if I'm wrong, did you, because I've seen various of your photos that I believe you've taken sort of studying different indigenous cultures, and I think one of them was from Borneo that I've seen of these two young villagers, right? And then I
It's
think
a very memorable one. That was not my photo. That was given to me to use. It's an incredibly striking photograph. I don't think we could get another like that because that culture has been decimated, as are many in the, indigenous people come under a lot of pressure from logging rights and mining rights, and it's a very vulnerable existence. So yeah, it's getting
Hmm.
harder and harder to find these people.
So it seems that this is sort of slowly being lost, right? And really everything is passed on through visual interpretation from when you're um, from a baby through adolescence, is just by observation, and this is how it used to be passed on, or is there some sense of actually explaining? You're right, like it may
It's
be
a
an obvious question, but
it's numerous inputs. Posture
mhm,
is a very cultural matter. So yes, the older generations are modeling for the younger generations what they need to do with in their bodies. But there's also wisdom in how you handle and how you design furniture, or and so you're also being molded, by the culture. It's not just modeling, it's also molding. And then there is also some formal instruction, but it's not very extensive.
mhm.
It's, little kids will be instructed or encouraged to carry little tiny pots on their head, not very useful for the family's tasks, but they're getting trained in how to do adult tasks. So there is a little bit of instruction as well. It's,
There is sort of the typical picture of maybe 50, 60 years ago, sort of in a, I don't know what to call it, maybe a grammar school or something like that, where you'll see like children with a book on their head, right?
yeah,
And is that, was there any truth in any of that, or is that just something that
definitely
was sort of an
used.
etiquette? Uh, yeah.
No, it used to be done both for etiquette, but also for having form, and there was overlap between those. Um, a book is not the most wonderful choice because if a book falls, it can really hurt you. So we tend, if I do use books, I use soft cover books with some elastic going across the axes so it sticks on your head a little bit. But we have a round head and a book is flat. So what the solution in most cultures is to have some kind of implement that squares your circle. And So you can put that on, a little fabric ring or a more formal woven ring, and then your load goes on top of that. We've actually designed a head cushion that is a very cool little tiny implement. We don't have many implements. It's got two little tails for whimsy so that people don't take themselves too seriously. But as you can see, it's easy to put on because it just molds to the shape of your head. So you don't have to go through all the rigmarole of having to create a ring and then put something on top of that. It just immediately gives our students a sense of which way is up. And the moment
Hmm.
you sense this axis, you line things up accordingly. It's actually really amazing to me how well this works. And I
And it needs
think
to have it needs to have some weight to it, does it not, to sort of
it
give you
does
that
so that
neural
it's
feedback? Hmm.
exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
Sometimes we put something weightless because the person has herniated
Mm.
cervical discs or extreme pain. So we just put something weightless that would slide off and, they can
Hmm.
get feedback that way. But it's very preferable to have some weight. And then that communicates to your neural pathways where the axis is along which you want to line your cervical spine and the rest of your spine up. So it's a kind of top down information
Hmm.
loop. And I think we have something genetically written in us to respond to weight bearing on the head. Um, because immediately people just improve more than you would expect. And it's
Hmm.
true that, we all carried stuff on our head until about a century ago. In every culture, it's the most efficient place to carry weight. And before we got fancy and had wagons or even backpacks or shoulder bags, we had our heads. And for certain terrain, it's particularly useful, but for all terrain, it's a very handy place to carry. And
It's funny
I
you
think
mention that because I feel like I only ever see sort of in indigenous cultures women carrying things on their head. Like
it
men
used
tend
to
to
be
just put
men.
it on their shoulder,
No, depending
or
on
I
the
still see it.
terrain, people carry in different places.
Hmm.
But it used to be men as well. I have a photograph that I like to share with my students, and it's from Covent Gardens, Britain, where all these guys have, they're carrying on their head like sheaf loaves of bread on a straw kind of implement, or flowers for sale, or, everybody carried on their head. Um, I think in a lot of cultures where they're still doing traditional ways of using their bodies, I think, it's mainly the women that are doing a lot of the work, you know, um, when things get sort of dissipated in a culture, it's, like the forests are gone, hunting is gone, and then the men don't have their traditional stuff to do, and all the things that are left that need to be done for the kids and for cooking and so on tend to be then taken done by just the women. So anyway, that I'm just musing
No,
out
no,
loud.
no problem. That's an interesting notion to 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 think about. But I guess that sort of brought to mind the neck in general feels like quite a weak um, thing to bear load, right? Like when I think I've seen an image that you've mentioned of nowadays we look at our phone and we sort of look down when we're looking at our phone and our head weighs 4 or 5 times as much, right? Or it
Indeed.
puts load, right?
Yeah.
So how is it that it's safe to sort of carry things on your head?
It's about the alignment.
Hmm.
If you put your head in an awkward position, then, if it's cantilevered forward, then yeah, the neck and the entire spine take quite a beating. But if things are well stacked, think about
Mm-hmm.
pillars on which we construct monuments. If those pillars are true, then it's perfect. Then that force gets transmitted down the chain to the rest of the spine and to the pelvis and the legs, and
Mm-hmm.
it works perfectly well. We've been doing this for a very long time, and you know, we weren't any worse for wear for carrying on our heads. It's only in very recent times that we've sort of
Mm-hmm.
forgotten how to be in our bodies, and we're doing things pretty randomly and in ways that damage us.
So I have an image here, for people that have not, that aren't so into this world. I can share my screen. I'm sure, I mean, this is not nothing new to you, but um, here I can share my screen. I wanted to see if you could sort of walk through that a little bit. No, nothing super in depth, but there's that double S or that double C. I forget what people call it.
Well, it's
Curve
S.
that
People
has been
call it S. The one
right.
on the left is a classic modern notion of what is normal for a human spine, and it's called
Mm-hmm.
an S-shaped spine. Yeah. They don't call
Mm-hmm.
this a double C, they call this a S. Yeah.
Okay.
And my claim is that this is a distorted view of what's normal. It's a bad paradigm around which we are designing furniture and issuing guidelines and what have you. Like we think that
Right.
our upper lumbar area should have a curve, and this is why every car seat has lumbar support, and every ergonomic chair has lumbar curves, and so on. And the picture on the right it comes from an older anatomy book published in 1911, and I coined the phrase J spine
Mm-hmm.
to describe what's going on there and to distinguish it in a quick to describe manner. Um, and so J, it's not a loopy kind of J, it's a modern, stylized calligraphy kind of J, you could say.
Okay.
And it's only at the way bottom, at L5S1, that you see a very significant curve. And that significant curve is what sets the behind. I
So this would be
sometimes
the
quit
very last vertebrae, correct?
the very last disc, right? That's
Disc.
where
Okay.
the angle is. Yeah.
Mm.
So L5 is part of this stack. And then S1, S standing for sacrum, is quite significantly angled back. And how much angle there is a little dependent on race, dependent on the individual, but it's always significantly angled back.
And this
And
is the
then
only disc that isn't um, just have
cylindrical.
yeah, cylindrical or two flat,
Yeah, it's a
parallel top
wedge,
and
it's
bottom.
a very wedge-shaped disc.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes L4, L5 is a little bit wedge-shaped as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's variation between humans, but and sometimes that L5 vertebra itself is a little bit wedge-shaped. Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
mostly it's the L5S1 disc that evolved when we went from being quadrupedal creatures that have perfectly cylindrical discs at every level
Mm.
to becoming bipedal creatures. And at this point, something has to change. And what changed the most is the L5S1 disc. And now that
Interesting.
it is wedge shaped, when we tuck our pelvis, we're actually squishing the front edge of that disc and forcing the contents of that disc backwards which is the most dangerous direction to threaten a disc, to challenge a disc. So, because you don't want the contents of the disc extruding backwards of all the places. I mean, a disc is just a mechanical device, but if you compromise it and all the 20 some fibrous external layers have worn through and you have the filling extruding out the back, especially, that's the most dangerous direction because that's where the the spinal nerves exit
Mm.
the spine. And so if you're unlucky, then your extruded portion is irritating, is impinging on a nerve root, some, and then you feel that referred sensation, possibly all the way down to the toes, if it's at, depending on what level your herniation is, determines where you feel referred sensation.
Mhm. This sort
So,
of nicely
there.
segues. Yeah, it's fine. This nicely segues a little bit into something that I've been meaning to ask you as well. I guess just to touch the topic of chiropractors. Um, Specifically, I was curious whether, from what you're mentioning, each disc has a certain connection with the obviously different parts of your body, and sensation lead through here up to your into your brain, right? That's main spinal cord. And then every time I speak to a chiropractor, they're telling me things about like how one nerve, when you have this disc, goes to your spleen, and another one goes to your liver, and so then I'm curious if there's any truth in that at all.
There's absolutely, it's fact that not the discs going, but the
The
spinal,
nerves.
the nerves. Yeah, the spinal nerves distribute in very particular ways, and at each level, there's variation, but for the most part, a given level with spinal nerve will distribute into certain parts of your body, certain organs, certain parts of your skin, and so on, right? So they branch out to supply nerve signals to a whole bunch of entities, right? Number of tissues. And so, yeah, in Chinese medicine, they have a correspondence worked out way before modern medicine, right? Where each level of the spine is thought to control things. In their model, it's named different things. But this correspondence is well known and is medical fact. That there are, like, lower in the spine, those nerves distribute to your legs. The ones that distribute to your hands come from someplace in your neck. And that's the cervical spine. And it's very well worked out where these things distribute, so it's known, like, and that's how you figure out which level. It's one of the ways you can figure out which level is affected, is you see where in the hand or leg there is sense, numbness or tingling, or and then which nerve root distributes there, and so on. Nowadays, people don't do so much with clinical testing because they pretty quickly jump to an MRI, which can actually show you exactly what's doing where. And interestingly, there's rather little correlation between clinical signs and MRI findings. That is a little factoid in medicine. When they first discovered MRIs, everybody looked like a surgical patient, and then they realized, whoa, wait a minute, there are people who look like they should be really hurting that don't hurt at all, and the other way around. So there's a lot of mystery when it comes to back pain. There's a lot,
Mm-hmm.
85% of back pain is considered non-specific back pain, which one of my MD friends once joked to me, "Oh, that's just a euphemism for saying we don't know what the heck is going on."
Hmm.
So there's a large gray area where a lot is unknown.
To stay on the same topic, I think when people ask me personally, just from my personal experience, whether they should go see a chiropractor, it seems like it's the same thing as going to the emergency room, for me at least, right? Like a few years ago, I was deadlifting and it seems like one of my ribs, for lack of a better medical term, sort of just popped out of its place, right? It was like a little bit dislocated, and like I didn't have to go to the emergency room or anything, but I did end up just waking up in the middle of the night with a lot of pain and was sort of foam rolling my back, sort of helped position it a little bit better. But eventually I went to a chiropractor and yeah, he noticed there was I guess a bump, right? And he snapped it back into place. And I had to go back 2 or 3 times because it kept on sort of wanting to stay out. And so every few years or so, it'll like sort of wanna head back out. And so I go to the chiropractor just for that one thing. And so then my experience with chiropractors at least has just been sort of for those acute things like that, that I know that if I had gone to a regular doctor, he would have just given me pain meds because they had
Yeah.
no
It's a
other option.
perfect application of chiropractic. When you have an injury and there's been a displacement of your bones, whether the ribs or the vertebrae themselves, then a skilled chiropractor can help nudge them back in place. Yeah. I think, like with many kinds of alternative practitioners, people expect too much and
Hmm.
sometimes overuse the modality. It's like if every week your bones are going out, as they put it, then we need to sit down and think, like, why are they going out? Like what muscle is tight or weak or that's pulling this out of place? And do I just want it nudged back in place? If there was an acute injury, it seems totally reasonable that you would want this extra intervention to nudge it back in place. But if there's a systematic error in the way you're using or underusing certain muscles, then that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you're just overusing this intervention, right? And not really getting to the root of the problem. So we we try to do just that. We try to get to the root of the problem and we get to it in a very organic way. So here we are different from physical therapy because physical therapy very often tries to get to the root of the problem by identifying a muscle that is too tight or too weak and then giving an exercise. And it's a exercise or a menu of exercises that people have to do, repeat many repetitions of to make things balance out better. And what we try to do is find a life exercise that will do that job. And what's great about that approach is that it's easy to do zillions of reps, right? Like if
Hmm.
it's the life exercise is by tweaking your gait, like you can actually get glute med firing with every step. Every step becomes a rep. Now you got 5,000 reps available to you, in a very practical way. You haven't taken a second out of your life to do it. You do have to invest in learning how to make this happen, but once you learn, you've learned to fish. It's like now you know how to really get to that muscle in a robust way without it intruding in your life. And it'll be in exactly the right proportion that nature intended, that we were designed to use that muscle. Yeah. So it's a
Well,
very good way.
I think one of the most difficult things that I had sort of after doing your course was first of all, keeping consistency, right, and sort of being aware all the time of my posture, and then also there's always sort of a tinge of, am I doing it right? You know, is it, am I where I'm supposed to be? And so, and I'm assuming this is why you've come up with the posture tracker. Uh, so,
So
you-
that's the ways, one of the
right.
ways. I mean, we spend a lot of our energy thinking about how to make our method more effective, more
Hmm.
efficient, more persistent in the brain, and so on. So we've come up with numerous ways. One way is to use technology. So I've actually got both. We've come up with two wearables, and one of them is a consumer product that, and it's two sensors that go on a pair of locations of the body. So right now I've got one on my chest and I've got one behind my right ear there, right? And what I then do is I apply what I've learned about head and neck position. So we have very particular ways of, for example, pulling the hair to help the head kind of back up like a car backing up into its garage and pivot the right amount. And it does take a little bit of coaching to learn how to do this, as you know. And then once we've gotten to a good position, we hit calibrate. And now you can see my
Mm.
head is in a position that's making this icon green. The whole head is green. And you can see that if I forget and do my old habit of raising my chin overly, that it shows me right away. The icon becomes orange or red. If I slump my head forward, it becomes different colors, pink and purple. And you can, I could also make it make a sound or vibrate if I wanted to be discreet and just carry this in my pocket. So it's one way of keeping my knowledge informing what I do, rather than just kind of sinking back to old habits. So it closes the gap between knowledge and habit. So that's one of the things we do. We help, we've evolved, invented to help students kind of learn faster. But we also have a really nice online program for alumni that we've opened to the public because it's different ways of exercising with our filters threaded through it. So yoga done our way, yeah, and fitness, Gokhale Fitness, and a dance program with constant reminders on what to do with the shoulders, what to do with the rib cage, and so on. Things that are very familiar to our students and the general public learns in bits and pieces, what to do posture wise while they're doing a jazz reach or whatever is the dance move of the day, or while they're doing sun salutation, they're reminded of what to do with their feet and what the pelvis needs to do and so on. So it's become a way of reminding and deepening the instructions ongoing. We have 17 live classes a week, and people can ask questions. And so we really have upped our game. We tried so many ways to provide alumni content, and it was difficult to provide in-person classes. And I actually
Especially
started this.
post-pandemic, I'm assuming.
So I started this January 1st, 2020,
Mm.
before the pandemic, because I was tired of hearing from alumni that who were so delighted and pleased with what they'd learned, and then they kind of faded and forgot over
Hmm.
time and thought, no, this is not good. We have to do something for our alumni. So I just decided to show up online every single day to remind them of one little nugget
Hmm.
that would be familiar or forgotten, and to put it back on their radar. And then the pandemic hit, and we realized, whoa, first of all, it
This
had
is
worked so well. People were saying, oh, now I finally understand what you mean by inner corset. And so I realized breaking things down into bite-sized pieces is a very good way of getting behavior change to happen.
hmm
But additionally, we realized, wow, people are now locked down. We better keep this. It was a 21-day challenge in the beginning. I didn't want to paint myself into a corner forever and ever. But then when the pandemic hit, we realized people really need this. And now we're 4 years into it. We haven't missed a single day. It's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We present on Christmas. We just do. And it's become a delight to a lot of people. And now our students don't forget.
Hmm.
So
I'm curious if you ever thought about posting on social media, because
we
like you were
do
saying, those small 30-second
we
bites
do
can
that.
help. Hmm
Totally. We do that. So
Mm,
we post on social media, but you know, our our ambitions are quite high. We really
hmm
want people to learn well how to be in their body. And there's only so much you can learn in little smidgens. It's a
hmm
fabulous way to remind yourself of what you learned, but to try to educate people in little tiny snippets, a whole different way of being in your body, sitting, standing, bending. I don't think that's the way to do the initial training.
hmm
It's a good reminder system. So we put it out there and people show up. And we hope that people really take that not so very inordinate amount of effort to delve deeply and really learn a new way to be in the world in that works.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. As somebody that went through your course, I can tell this is something that you definitely need to do in person and sort of have sort of hands-on and have that experience, because if not, you'll definitely not understand. Like I had read your book and I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at, right? Like I liked your approach and like the sort of that primal origin, right? Because that's something that's always made sense to me, but it
Yeah.
was not something that I could quite grasp until somebody put their hands on my back and sort of taught me.
You
So,
know, I definitely agree that it's extremely difficult, challenging to get the details from the book. And I used to share your bias that you need to have hands-on. And I actually vetoed online learning for many, many years. Many people would come and say, oh, you should teach this online. I'd say, no, we don't. I'm wed to excellence. I like things to be really good and thorough. But I have to say, you know, after seeing the success of that reminder program, the exercise program, we call it Gokhale Active. When the pandemic hit and everything in person was shut down, I realized that maybe it was time to teach the basics online. We do it one-on-one to this
mm,
date, and I've been proven wrong. It's incredibly effective.
mm,
It turns out to be more like tennis coaching than it is like massage. Massage you can't do online very
mhm.
effective.
Right, right.
But tennis is something where if the coach can see what you're doing, they can give you very useful input. They don't come and hold your arm and do things for you. They give you very pointed guidelines, and it turns out to be like that. So we have seen similar results from online done the way we're doing one-on-one. So it's very tailor-made. The teacher can
hmm
say, no, slow that down, go a little higher. Okay, now go back. No, no, not your elbow. And, so they can really teach this online. So we are doing that. And the randomized
Beautiful.
controlled trial that is being held by Stanford, comparing us with physical therapy for lower back pain. They're very, very happy about this study happening. That's going to be studying the online intervention. It's as teaching one-on-one someone who has back pain over 18 lessons, yeah, each one being only 13 minutes long. They learn just one thing, and then they go and practice that one thing for a couple of days, and then they come back for the next thing. And lo and behold, it works like a charm.
Beautiful. Well, I look forward to reading it. That's exciting. Always supporting Stanford research. So,
Yeah,
uh,
you're from Stanford too. That's where we originally met when you were at
this is true.
Stanford. Yeah.
It's coincidences of life. I actually took your course when I still lived in Austin, but yeah, we did meet
Oh,
in Stanford. So beautiful. But yeah, so before we run out of time, I had a couple more questions for you here. I can share my screen. Uh, Here's another couple other things that I wanted to touch on. Namely, let me just share my entire screen here. Let me see if so I can share a few pictures. So here's one image that I wanted to get your opinion on. I don't believe this is yours,
no.
but right. And I can see if I can pull up another one that might be actually yours. There we
That
go.
is ours. I recognize that
Right.
one.
Right. So, and there might be another one that can help see. So there is sort of a thing going on online right now about barefoot shoes, and I wanted to get
Okay.
your opinion on them. Specifically, sort of this idea of sort of a V-shaped foot, and you'll see a lot of the shoes coming out nowadays that are barefoot. So they have the zero drop that they've always had, but they're starting to be sort of this round uh, shape at the toe and tapered downwards. And this is another image, I think, again from one of the brands, sort of showing sort of the V-shaped foot, and then after going to school and being in sort of a narrow shoe, the toe starts going in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've always thought like these shoes are sort of a little bit ugly, and I don't really think they need to have all of that space that they do have, especially considering, when you see sort of the kidney bean-shaped foot that you talk about. So I'm curious sort of what your perspective is on shoes and then just on sort of foot structure and what that should look like, right?
Well, we're talking about several characteristics at once. The bean shape has to do with the,
Front.
not really, it's the shape of the footprint. So, I wouldn't make the distinction so much about V shape.
Mm-hmm.
So the part about the shape that I like is a big toe box. I think that's necessary. And yeah, having a lot of space for all the toes is very helpful. You do, especially don't want to send the big toe inwards. Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of foot you see on tree climbing tribes, where you have an exaggerated bean shape, where the big
Mm-hmm.
toe really curves in towards the medial line. That is very characteristic of tree climbing people. People who stay on flat land don't have that exaggerated of a toe curving into the center. It'll happen more. But it definitely won't be pushed out to the outside of the body and have the beginning of a bunion. That you never want. Yeah. So, yeah, you want to have a big toe box, and that I agree with. Now, about the shape of the footprint, that bean shape is talking about what in the shoe industry was called a curved last. Yeah. Instead of a straight last that you find is used for many of the teenage shoes. If you look at Converse shoes, they just go straight up and down, right? And then there's something called a semi-curved last, which has a little bit of a crescent shape to it, and a curved last, a little bit more of a crescent shape. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about kidney bean. I'm talking about that aerial view, the crescent shape of the foot, okay, which is a separate matter from how big the toe box should be. Yeah. And then there's yet another thing, because a foot is a three-dimensional thing. It's how high the arches are. So in addition to wanting a curved last, I also like a high profile in the shoe, so that you're not squishing the foot flat in the up to down dimension. Yeah. I used to have a really cute pair of shoes, but it was too thin. It bit my foot to be, it flattened my foot, and that was just no good. So I had to get rid of it. So it has to do with how high they allow the arches, all of the arches, the inner arch, the outer arch, the metatarsal arch. You want room going from the floor to the top of your foot. And so that's a separate matter. So you want all of these different things in a shoe, ideally. And I wouldn't make so much of, like a V, or doesn't quite capture all of these elements that I'm talking about. It may or may not, depending on how the three-dimensional shape is.
But it almost seems if you need space above, you need somewhat of a growing shoe that you have a larger toe box. And then, yeah, that three-dimensional space, it almost seems like it'd be difficult to make a shoe that sort of doesn't fall off your foot, right? That it was just sort of tight at your ankles, I want to say.
Yeah. Well,
You
and then there are other variables that are genetic. For example, I have
know? Right.
very narrow ankles, and
Mm,
some people have broader ankles, so that has to be fit as well. I
mm-hmm,
once had a pair of shoes made by someone who felt very strongly that everybody needs to have shoes to fit their particular
mm,
foot. And he took ages to measure this way, measure that way. Part of why I ordered a shoe from him is I wanted to see his process, and I videotaped the whole session so that I could see what all he was doing. And he had tried to float a business, but for
mm-hmm,
obvious reasons, it was a challenging one to get going. It needed so
mm-hmm.
much tailor-made work that it didn't quite succeed. And
Not quite scalable, right?
yeah,
All
so
right.
sometimes good
Beautiful.
things don't necessarily work uh, practically, but
So I presume your recommendation is to just try a bunch of different brands, right? And see what sort of works for you.
well, I think it helps to have some knowledge, because it's not just about fitting your foot.
Mm,
That's the idea of a lot of orthotics, the
mm,
way they're designed. Take an imprint. This is your foot. Here's the orthotic that matches. End of story. There's no
mm,
notion that you could actually reshape your foot. And so what I prefer is a kind of aspirational prop, something that's midway between where your foot is currently at and where you want to go, and that nudges it in a right direction, and that works in a two-prong fashion. One as a safety net from preventing further distortion when you're not paying attention and you're not doing what needs to happen in a foot, like
mm-hmm,
grip the ground and what have you. And then it also wants to work like a coach. It's reminding you, hey, do your thing
mm-hmm,
that will make your foot this shape. So that's what I like to see in a prop, whether it's a insole or a entire shoe or a chair or a shoulder device or anything, wants to have that two-prong built-in nudge, like
Mm,
remind you what to do. And if you don't have the bandwidth to do that, serve as a safety net. Don't let things get worse.
mm. So would you say a shoe that's just completely flat and doesn't give any response, not a good thing then?
It depends who you are. If you're a
Right, right,
hunter-gatherer, you wear whatever, no problem.
right,
You're going to be just fine.
right.
If you have severely damaged feet, you've got plantar
Mm,
fasciitis, you've got bunions, you've got all kinds of inflammation and problems in your feet, then you better have some structure in your foot to not, and you would have no idea what to do with your foot, how to stand, how to walk, how to weight bear. You better
mm-hmm,
have some structure in your feet, or you're going to be
mm-hmm,
on your shoe, or you're going to be in big trouble, worse trouble, right?
mm,
And then there's everything in between. Like, ideally, we like for people to learn better and better what to do with their feet, with their body, how to weight bear, how to stand, so that you're not squishing the entire delicate front
mm-hmm,
part of your foot as you stand, as you walk. So learn more and do this, wear an appropriate prop that depends on how much you know, how damaged your feet are, what kind of surface you're going to be walking on, how much bandwidth you have in your brain to apply what you know to
mm-hmm,
how you're going to be standing and walking. So all of those things, so a little mix, like when you're
mm-hmm,
paying really close attention, that would be a good time to go barefoot on the beach and implement what this gripping and grabbing
right.
and weight bearing that we teach. If you are thinking about your next business problem or theorem you're solving and you're talking with your friend, that might be the time to wear a structured shoe because you're not thinking about your feet at all and you're going back to your old habits. So
Right.
that's my view.
Right. No, that's great because I think a lot of people have this idea now, since it's sort of the idea of barefoot shoes is sort of exploding, at least in some circles. Sometimes we live in an echo chamber, but there's this idea that that barefoot shoes are just like a panacea. Like suddenly you're gonna
You know,
be
it's
great now.
it's a
It's a
bit like
start, but
throwing someone into the deep end of the pool.
hmm
You hope they swim, you know, but there's a possibility that they don't, and they could be like damaged, right?
hmm hmm
And, that's an extreme example, but the idea holds, just expecting that putting them into some sort of ideal framework is going to make everything settle well is a little naive, I think.
hmm
There's a
hmm
piece of that will work and happen, and you want a piece of that, but you also will be helped by learning, what
hmm
to do rather than, getting in trouble, having injuries. Um, there is some self-learning, like you do learn from the impact to then lessen your the weight at which you
hmm
hit the ground, but you could expedite that with a little bit of training. And I think they should go hand in hand. Go in the direction of what's natural and ideal for you, modulo your injuries and so on,
hmm
and get some training to better prepare you for that because you're starting off from such a far-flung starting point. Most of us don't have anything like those hunter-gatherer feet. And to then suddenly go running around on bare
Right.
surfaces. Hmm.
Beautiful. Yeah, this for some reason something popped into my head. Like um, we were talking about yoga earlier, and again, this is our idea of sort of panaceas, and sort of the idea of belly breathing has become this big thing as well. And I think
Mm.
I've heard you talk about it, and I was curious yeah, if you could just, I know we're running out of time here, but if you could
No, I
mention
have
what
lots
your
of
thoughts
ideas
are.
about belly breathing. So I think it's a really useful way to know how to breathe because when you need every avenue of expansion avail possible for your lungs, when you're really vigorously exercising, you need to be able to belly breathe. Also, when you need control, you're playing the saxophone, you're singing, you want the diaphragm, that's where you get the most control. So it's a
Hmm.
really good way to train, but I don't think at all that it's the right default breathing. I think that is a misunderstanding. I have theories about how that misunderstanding came about,
Hmm.
but I think it's just plain wrong to train people to exclusively breathe with their bellies at all times. Yeah, which is what some people are trying to do. And what it results in is several really problematic things. One is the areas that should also be moving, that should actually be moving as a part of default breathing pattern, get stiff and tight and under, they don't get the stretch they need. I'm talking about the intercostal muscles, for example. They need to be stretched and moved, and that stimulates circulation for the upper body. And so you're missing out on that. You're missing out on movement, up and down movement in the back, that I think is a natural part of default breathing pattern.
Hmm.
And so now your back is anemic and sitting over there and never getting, and we don't get blood supply to the discs. Yeah. So if
Hmm.
you're putting stress on the discs and not decompressing them with your breath or other ways, then they just sit there and stay injured. They don't have any other way. So, but when you have this kind of up and down pumping motion that I think is a normal part of default breathing pattern, then you would be self-healing just as a
Hmm.
byproduct of breathing. So to miss out on that is a huge thing. I also have noticed a pattern that people who have really taken belly breathing to heart or to stomach, whatever, they tend to have really weak abs because
Hmm.
without weakness in your abs, you can't get enough breath. And
Hmm.
so they kind of train themselves to remain very weak in their deep abdominal muscles. And then they show up with very poochy bellies and very sunken chests because they stop breathing in their chests. So they're not getting this natural stress on the bones, too. It's not just the intercostal muscles that need that movement, but even the bones, the rib cage needs that healthy stress of breathing
Hmm.
to model it, to make it nice and expanded. And so you have a big breathing chamber. So, and yeah, so I could go on and on,
Yeah,
I have
definitely.
theory about where this all came to be, but I won't keep going.
No worries. Yeah, I guess just the last thing that I wanted to touch on, I think we mentioned, is the stuff about Jaws. I know that we probably don't have much time to expand on it, but there's just somebody that I've always wanted to sort of bring to your attention because while I was in the Bay Area, I did some work with a dentist that sort of expanded my jaw, and all his sort of research going back thousands of years, not obviously not personal research, but his investigation and how he got into what he does now. He's Dr. Dwight Jennings, if anybody wants to look him up. He expanded my upper jaw like like a centimeter and a half or 2 centimeters. Like it's a lot. And a lot of people have underdeveloped jaws nowadays just from
Mm-hmm.
not having that need to always be chewing as much as before.
Yeah,
And he does talk about a little bit about how that affects your neck posture. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I've always wanted to put you two in a room to see to see what would come out of that conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, it's not my area of expertise, but I do know a little bit. So one of the ways you naturally expand your upper jaw is by having your tongue rest on the roof of your mouth and that pressure. helps the um, the
Expansion,
jaw
yeah.
expand. And people who mouth breathe, for example, then are
Oh.
missing that natural pressure. So that's so, my observation has been that neck posture really helps your lower jaw settle better. Like if you raise your chin, which is what a lot of people end up doing because they
Mm-hmm.
round their upper back. And why do they round their upper back? Usually because they're tucking their pelvis, which sometimes is something someone taught them to do, but in any case, for whatever reason, it's common. So the hierarchy goes: you tuck your pelvis, it makes your upper body rounded, and now, since nobody wants to sit there like a C looking at the floor, we arch our
Mm-hmm.
neck. Okay. And with that arched neck position, the lower jaw kind of settles back, and you have what's called overjet, yeah, where your upper teeth way extrude beyond the lower teeth, and you don't have. So, by having a more healthy structure, one of the benefits is that your head will be in a better place. I mean, pun intended. But you also get your jaw to kind of be nudged or settled by gravity to be in a better place. And then your teeth match up better.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
your breathing
My teeth
space.
touch tip to tip now after working with him, which
It's
is,
cool, right?
yeah, yeah.
So there are many ways one can get at a good result.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly having good posture is conducive to better dentition, to a better, especially lower jaw
Mm-hmm.
position. You hear a lot that people, um, you know, in the alternative dentist community,
Mm-hmm.
or actually even in mainstream, like for sleep apnea cases, very often they want to break the jaw and settle the lower jaw further forward. And I find myself thinking, no, 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 don't go there until you've tried the natural
Mm-hmm.
means of helping the jaw settle better. Let gravity do its job on your jaw and then see what you need, you know. So, and how do we get the jaw to settle well? I like to always go to the root of the problem, which is often in the pelvis. The way the pelvis is settled determines how the rest of your spine is going to stack. And so these are things which definitely don't have a negative side effect. Whereas anytime you're talking about surgery, there's always potential for something going wrong. And so if you really need it, then you want to thank your lucky stars that we live in a day and age where we have people with those kind of skills and who are available, and you can have that available. But you don't run there as a first resort.
I definitely think there's a movement towards trying to find a natural solution first, and if that's exhausted, then we can, move into
Thank
something that's,
goodness. It's so
yeah.
overdue. It's just
Mm-hmm.
astonishing to me how readily people are willing to get their bodies cut open. And it's like, no, 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 you never know how the scarring is going to happen. And have you talked with people who've had, bad effects?
Mm-hmm.
Don't gamble on this, Only
Mm-hmm.
do it if it's absolutely necessary. So I just
Beautiful.
hope.
Well, yeah. Continue if you'd like.
No, no,
You'd
I
hope.
said,
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, this was an enlightening conversation, definitely, and I'm glad that you're sharing this knowledge. As a person that struggled with his back pain for many, many years, I'm so glad that I found you, and hopefully, this platform can help share your information with others as well. So,
well, thank you so much, Andres. It's especially wonderful when the younger crowd is seeking and finding and spreading. That's absolutely bodes well for our future as a species. Thank you, Andres.
Thank you so much.